And so for some of you who are here joining us, maybe you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat and just tell us where you're coming from. That would be great. Thank you.
Hi there, Cam.
Okay, so thank you very much for everyone for joining us. This is our first Women Ed collaboration between ECIS and Women Ed. And I'm Angeline Au from Women Ed Germany, Women Ed DE. And I'm here with my colleague from Women Ed Spain, Cara.
Hi there, everyone. Two of us from Women Ed Spain. We'll introduce ourselves in a minute.
Yeah. And so today's webinar, we're going to be talking about eradicating systemic bias, how to identify and counter international school blind spots. And we're going to begin by speaking a little bit about the collaboration that we have. And so if we could have the next slide, please.
Sure.
Yeah, so ECIS have different special interest groups, and we have a newly formed interest group for women in education. So this group is just at their inception points at the moment, and I'll be chairing this group, and I'll be joined by Kyra and a few other great colleagues, Cam being one of them, and we will be working towards, hopefully, starting a conference in 2022, and leading up to that conference, we're very proud to be able to offer these heart-to-heart conversations that was started through Women Ed, and now we're starting an international series that is going to focus on the international education sector. And yeah, so a little bit about Women Ed. We are a nonprofit organization, and there are many different country networks that started by volunteers like Kyra and myself, and many people who are also in the audience and on the panel today. And so we volunteer to organize meetups. There's lots of online events at the moment, book clubs and so on, to help support women in education and their leadership paths and with their careers.
Great. So I'm going to take over and just go through the housekeeping notes as we are used to doing in the series. I'm sure by now you've all attended 1,000 webinars. We can't hear you or see you, so please do use the chat. We really use that and we watch it with eagle eyes to see what questions and comments are coming up, and we will put those to the panelists at the end and throughout presentations. You can reply to panelists and attendees so that we can all see that. We won't be using raise your hand feature because quite frankly, we don't always notice that you're there, so make sure that you get your comments in the chat. The session will be recorded and it's being posted onto ECIS's YouTube, and then it should go up again on Women Ed's YouTube after that as well. Tomorrow probably is when it will go on. And we'd love to hear from you on social media. So you can interact with us on Twitter. We've given you all of our Twitter handles so that you can at us directly, or you can follow the conversation using #WomenEd or Women Ed Heart to Heart. As you'll see, we have our Twitter handles there at the bottom, but the speakers' Twitters are available when we introduce them momentarily as well. So please do engage. We love hearing from you, and thanks for being here. I can see so many awesome people from different parts of the world. It's really impressive. So I'm going to take away the beginning of the presentation of our speakers, our panelists, and I'm very, very happy to introduce Louise Jordan, who is my Women Ed Spain colleague. As of this year, she is a Women Ed network lead with us in Spain, and we met her at our launch in March, so a very proactive deputy head at a private school in Madrid. She is a proud Scot who's been living in Spain for the last few years, 10 years of experience of working as a SENCO. She's worked also as a designated safeguarding lead, and she's one of those fantastic people who mentors others, which is why she was so perfect for Women Ed. She's been mentoring newly qualified teachers and PGCE students. She's passionate about ensuring all children have equal access to a curriculum that is representative of them and ethical by design. One of the first conversations we had face-to-face was about making feminist schools, so I loved her immediately. And you can see her Twitter handle is @Leezy84, so delighted to introduce Anne Louise. I'm just going to skip forward one slide and introduce her colleague also, Ebony, who is with us in spirit but not presentially. So we'll hear from Ebony in a recording. She and Anne Louise have worked on embedding a diverse curriculum in their own school in Madrid, so they're colleagues. Ebony is British. She is of a Jamaican family raised in London. She moved to Madrid in 2012 with 7 years of early years teaching experience. And together with Anne Louise, she has been part of, well, in fact, instrumental in starting an equality, diversity and inclusion working group in the school, King's School in Madrid, working to deliver a diverse curriculum. So she will give us the intro as to what they actually did. And then Anne Louise is here, of course, to follow up with questions, comments, and to fill out some of the details of what they did. If you'd like to connect with Ebony, she's also on Twitter @EbonyBlagden.
And joining us also today, we have Mala Hunter, who's coming in from the west coast of the state. So it's 8 a.m. where Mala is at the moment. And she's a Jamaican American who founded Live, Love, Teach and LLC, and she's a global education consulting firm. And as you can see, she's got 17 years of experience working across 4 different countries. And so she's an expert in providing diversity and inclusion training. And she's also developing curriculum and is an instructional designer. And you can follow her on both Miss Mala Hunter on Twitter, as well as Live, Love, Teach LLC. So welcome, Mala. And we also have Nunana, who's joining us today, and he's coming to us from the Council of International Schools, CIS. He's the Associate Director of Higher Education Services. And so it's great to have both, like when we talk about Women Ed, we'd love to talk about all forms of education from all the early years all the way up to colleges and universities. So it's great to have representation there as well. And so Nunana is someone who bridges that gap by connecting schools and universities. He supports students with transition to higher education. He's been working with university admission and guidance. He himself is a third culture kid. And as you can see, although it's titled Third Culture Kid, there are 5 countries in which Nunana has experience with as well. And he's worked in the US and is now based in the Netherlands. So welcome, Nunana. And his Twitter is also Nunana Naomi. And you'll find that too. One of the campaigns of Women Ed is we're working towards narrowing some of the gaps. And so we're focusing on promoting women in leadership, because although women make up about, on average across the globe, 70% of teachers, when it comes to educational leadership, it's not 70% of people in roles of directors or principals. And so thinking about that, I mean, of course, we would love to have more men also in teaching itself, yeah, but and that's also like a different challenge, but also thinking about, are we then getting the best people who have experience in education in leadership roles, who have the power to make decisions that are going to impact all of the learners in our institutions. And this is why one of our campaigns is to increase representation in leadership roles. So representation of both women, but also one of Women Ed's campaigns is representation of diverse women. And so that's also something that we're working towards.
Sorry, we've gone backwards, not forwards.
That's okay. I sometimes go backwards too, just to be able to go forwards.
There we go.
And so what I was just saying about women entering into leadership and going on has been coming up in the data over and over again. And it's great that Nunana's here with us today, because he could tell us a little bit more about this slide and the data that's just actually hot off the presses, as you can see, October 2020. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Nunana, to tell us a little bit more about the information here.
Sure. Thanks so much for having us and for the great introductions. I'll just go ahead and jump right in and talk a little bit about this. So CIS, one of the things that we've been doing is conducting a salary survey within our member schools. Happens on an annual basis. And the most recent one indeed was just completed, and you can see a little bit of the results there. That perhaps right around 300 educators took the survey. About 70% of them were male head of schools compared to the other 30%. So that's actually seems to flip exactly what Angeline was talking about in terms of the statistics of women representation. But to summarize really the findings that we're seeing already from the data, you see that women leaders essentially have to work harder to attain leadership roles that end up paying less than their male counterparts. Just to kind of summarize what the data is telling us. We see there's a pay gap between genders, and that's about $15,000, as you can see there. And that decreases slightly for school heads who have master's degrees, but it actually reverses when school heads, female school heads have doctorate degrees, then they actually end up getting paid more. And then the other data that we see is that women end up being paid less than men right up until the 15th year as a school head. So typically on average, it takes 15 years for a woman to close that pay gap to a man when it comes to the highest level of leadership in international schools. So that tells us how much work we still have to do. And what I'm excited also about this year with the research is that in addition to just looking at gender, and by the way, the research actually looks at a variety of different categories like region where a school is located and a variety of other things. But for the purpose of this talk, we're focusing on bias. So in addition to gender, we also looked at ethnicity for the first time this year. And you'll see that the ethnicity pay gap actually never closes across all levels of education, across the number of years of experience that somebody might have. On average, non-white heads of school, never end up earning the same as their white counterparts. So, that's just something, again, that shows us some of the gaps, what needs to be done. And to your point, Angeline, about the type of work that you all are engaging in with Women Ed, thinking about how gender and ethnicity intersect is going to be also important, because it's kind of almost a double whammy if you're thinking about the gender impact that somebody has to overcome, as well as the ethnicity impact. Maybe one last thing to close on is really this clear emphasis on that doctoral degree, that most leaders end up having to really prove themselves and get up to that doctorate level to be able to, really end up getting that head of school kind of leadership position. So that's what we're seeing. That's the work that we have to do. And I'll just turn it back to you at this point, Angeline.
Thank you, Nunana, for giving us insights into how that data is collected and the way in which CIS has also been adapting the way in which they collect that data to make it more informative for how what we need to be working on to try and close those gaps as well. And so it's also interesting to hear how the new information is coming out, because back in 2018, the pay gap was at 23%. And so when I first learned that, it was quite shocking, between what women earned compared to what men earned. And then when I heard that 23%, my first reaction was kind of, oh, does that mean that after 4 years, we're working for free for the 5th year as a woman, and then the implications of that then on everyone's pensions also is an enormous implication then, when you think about the long-term effects of that as well. And and building on also on what Nunana said about the intersection of racial divides and what it's like as the gender and the race combined together. If we could go to the next slide there as well. So this is information from another survey that was done, and it was the article's titled "Held Down and Held Back: Systematically Delayed Principal Promotions by Race and Gender," and it was done in the States. And they found that race and gender are associated with the probability of promotion to school leadership, and that Black principals are least likely to be promoted, and they wait longer for a promotion when compared to white assistant principals. And additionally, the findings suggested that even though women have over a year more experience on average before being promoted to assistant principal, they are less likely to be promoted to high school principal. And when they are, it is after a long time at the assistant principal level. And so the study found that women spend about 5.6 years as an assistant principal versus about 4.9 years for men, and that women assigned to the assistant principal roles in high school are less likely than men to be actually promoted to principalships in high school. And so the men's promotion rates are roughly 5 to 7% higher than women's in every time period. So this double identified when you identify as both a woman and as a Black woman or a woman of color, you could further lengthen the average tenure that you have in that middle leadership position before going into a senior leadership position. So that data there is really, as the title suggests, it's holding people down and back through that's why we've centered our discussion today about thinking about, well, there must be all of this systemic bias that's creating this, because I refuse to kind of believe that 70% of the teaching population being women, that we're not as equally either qualified or talented as well. So there must be something else going on here. We
just add that in the comments that's being reflected. We've had some comments here saying obviously people are finding it shocking, but there's data coming in from Juliette, who's in the Netherlands, saying that primary teachers are also earning less than secondary teachers, on average 20%, and that there's a perception amongst male colleagues who are here as well that even though they might not be able to see it from the same perspective, they absolutely know that colleagues sense it. So I think it's important that we have male voices here today as well, who are obviously doing the work to try and redress those balances. We thank you for your interest and for your presence.
So building on that, like our first question is really, what do you think is the most urgent issue to tackle this systemic bias? And perhaps I'd love to hear from you, Marla. What are your thoughts on this?
So one of the things is that when I'm reading the chat as we're discussing, one of the things I just want to quickly address is the fact that whereas others find it shocking, it's not shocking for those of us who live this daily life. So being a Black woman, I automatically have those double whammies that have been put in there. So this is something that has been with me since birth. And then being that I was in leadership position, both internationally and now back stateside, it's still the same. So when people say that it's shocking, I've never been shocked by it. So the thing in being able to tackle systemic bias, that's a hard conversation, because right now that's all we're kind of doing is having these conversations. And I know that's where it needs to start. However, we've been having these conversations for years. And so whether it's been in our own groupings with the BIPOC community, or now that it has spilled over into everyone having these conversations, now it's time, really, it is to step up, like how we're having this webinar right now and actually seeing the data that has been taken. So thank you, Nana, for showing that as well, that people actually need to see what's being done and see how it is and hear the stories from people that have to go through this every single day of their lives. And then the urgency that we need to do is actually make strategic steps. Like there needs to be strategic plans put into place to say, okay, so this gap, there shouldn't be a gap. Because yes, right now I'm debating, okay, so do I really need to go back to school to get a doctorate? I don't really want to go back to school to get a doctorate. That's more time and more money that I can be spending furthering my career. But that's the thing that you as a Black woman, I have to think about all the time. And even when I go back to school to get my doctorate, what does that even mean for me when I'm finished? Because I still have to prove myself that I'm even worthy of what it is I know that I'm worthy for in the end. So right now, I really think that the urgent issue that we need to tackle with all this systemic bias, especially within the schooling system, like just like how we have the DEI strategic planning, we need to do that as far as the hiring process as well. And actually say, okay, by this certain time, this is what needs to be accomplished. By this certain time, this is what we need to accomplish. Because I will tell you, I'm sick and tired of these conversations.
We absolutely hear you. The chat is hearing you as well. There's just a lot of affirmation happening there. So I think people here are interested in hearing what we actually do. What are the receipts? What are we going to show? You know, and I think, you know, I'd like to go to Anne-Louise here because I know that you have made steps within your own school, which we'll hear about later. But first of all, what did you think was the most urgent? What created this urgency for you in your own setting as well? And thank you, Marla, for those very important points.
I mean, I'm rooting for you, Marla. Everything you said, I absolutely agree, and I firmly believe we need to tackle everything. There's no doubt about it. But I totally get what Marla's saying. We need to do it right. We need to do it carefully, and we need to plan it. So it depends on what your organization needs. My organization doesn't need, we've already tackled race. I mean, we are on it. We are really flying with it. So the next thing to tackle, LGBTQIA+, that's the next urgency for us, because we feel that maybe that's not what we've been tackling enough of. So I think it's about taking a temperature check. What needs to be done? What are the main issues that need to be repaired? And not forgetting about the ones that you've already embarked upon. So we're not forgetting the race, we're not forgetting the ethnicity, we're not forgetting the culture, we're keeping that going. But now it's time to add on another layer. Does that make sense? I think that for me is to, you know, we've been talking about it enough, and I'm done with talking, and just action, just get it done. I think I put in the chat, we need to start getting it done now.
And I'd like to go to Ninana quickly as well, for the higher ed perspective, because I feel that perhaps the conversation is slightly different, more nuanced, or has been taking place potentially for longer in the HE sphere. I don't know what your thoughts are about the most urgent issues still pressing.
Well, I think in the HE sphere, there's also, you also see at the leadership level, you know, these same disparities. So that, you know, it's still, I would say that the urgency is still there to talk about representation of a variety of different identities, you know, gender, race, sexuality, at that leadership level, and really affirming that as well through curriculum as well, and how you school your whole community. And this applies, of course, both to the higher ed setting as well as it does for education. So in addition to the points that have just been raised, I think education is also an important topic and urgent as well, because we're talking about the next generation, and the way that these these biases have become systemic is because, you know, our whole society, kind of pop culture, everything that we breathe and live around us is sending us messages that are then telling that then become institutionalized. And so one study that actually struck me was the University of Canberra did a study of the steps that students take. I think it was for 8 to 12-year-olds. And they found that girls take 2,000 less steps per day than boys. So what does that tell us about how we're educating girls, the messages that we're sharing, what is the PE class looking like for girls versus for boys? What does it mean when you give, you know, this specific country, a lot of schools wear uniforms. So what does it mean when girls are wearing skirts, and what does that mean for restricting movement and whatever, you know? So those are all things that, you know, they sound really simple, but it's really, we also need to be paying attention to that as well. But I definitely don't want to take away from what has already been said, which is representation. Absolutely, we need to make sure that that we are working on ensuring this proper representation at the leadership level as a matter of urgency.
Yeah, thank you, Ninala. Great points.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's move on. We've got so much to do.
Yeah, we do. There certainly is a lot of work, and what I'm hearing is from multiple levels as well. So, I mean, picking up on what Marla said about, you know, what are the standards like? So, do women always have to constantly prove themselves to be worthy of this? So there is that performance bias at play. Yeah. So some performances that are maybe being held at a higher esteem, although it's different, although we're doing the same job as well. And so that's something that's quite systemic and at a cognitive level. And so there are a lot of biases and stereotypes and cultural norms that are out there. So that's what it sounds like we're picking up on many different experiences, but also that systematic and structural things that we want to put in place. So do we have a plan? Are we prioritizing this in our budgets, in the implications of putting this stuff into practice, and what does that mean in order to be able to cultivate a more equitable structure? So it sounds to me that there are two things that are very urgent, and it's that one's changing perspectives through different initiatives and through curricula and so on, but also on a structural level that needs to prioritize the DEI work that needs to happen. Yeah. So our next question is, I think we've also, you know, we've touched a lot on some of this as well. You know, what role does then gender-based bias play for aspiring and existing women leaders? So some of the visuals here, as you can see, might give you a bit of impulses as well to thinking about it. And yeah, maybe here I'd like to go back to you, Marla. What do you think?
So this kind of answers the question for Michelle that she put out there. By do you think that women in BAME have to prove that they are qualified? And I don't know if you all have seen the article, and I kind of refuse to read it based on the heading alone. It's the older white male and it basically states that he taught for 17 years and didn't know how to read. There is no way that I could ever do that. I am in my 17th year of education, and no one that I know could ever do that, especially if they are part of the BIPOC community, which is Black, Indigenous people of color, and especially a woman. So that it plays a huge role in the gender bias. The fact that he was a white male and got away with it for 17 years, taught multiple children, both elementary and high school, and got away with not knowing how to read. That answers your question right there. There's a huge bias, because even with any multiple degrees, women still, and Black people still have to push forward and work harder. So yes, gender role plays a huge bias in leadership. The amount of interview processes that I even have to go through in order to gain an opportunity, and to be told, oh, you might not be ready because this may be larger than what you have worked with before. How would you know whether I'm ready or not? Just because your institution is larger than what something else, or based on that, I've proven myself working at any institution, period. I should be able to look at my track record, listen to the references that I've given you. If they've told you that I'm able to do it, then there shouldn't be a question within my leadership skills. However, that still plays a part in our leadership skills. So even if you go back to old school, looking at the beginning of education period, if you look at the rules and regulations that were put in for women teachers, things that they could not do, things that between a certain hours, yes, gender roles play a huge part in any hiring process, whether it's education or not, and it's tiring.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for your response there, Marla, and I completely agree with you. And the chat is mentioning, I think Liz mentioned a question about should then CVs be, blind CVs, in order to try and mitigate that bias, whether unconscious or conscious, that's happening. And another thing that's been happening, I think, in Germany right now, a recent law has been passed where 30% of board members now need to be women. They've passed a quota. So I'm also wondering, I'd love to hear maybe Nunana, what do you think about quotas for leadership positions, either on boards or in schools? And yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Actually, I think it's Norway who actually did this as well, and it has proven to have worked. So we actually have something to go to say, actually, you know what, establishing quotas for boards actually does have an impact. And, of course, at the time that it was being done, people thought, what are you guys doing? This is crazy. Why would you, it's actually an age-old question and tension maybe to think about for any institution is, how much do you lead change based on kind of teaching everyone and hoping that everyone kind of starts to create strategies, versus when do you have to step in and say, actually, we need to change the policy now. And the truth is, every organization is going to have a probably slightly different answer for what actually will work best to bring everyone along. There are going to be certain instances, certain situations that will need kind of that carrot approach of, let's all come in together, let's all build the idea together. And there are definitely going to be other items where we need to be a bit more urgent, and we need to put the foot down and say, you know what, we need to change the leadership drastically and put in a quota. I hesitate to say for every school or for every organization, we need to impose quotas, because if it's not done thoughtfully in your context, it could also have, a backlash kind of effect. So I would say it's a very effective tool, but also think about it in terms of your context.
Yes, thank you, Nunana. Very, very useful points and very salient points from you again. I'm going to move on to the next question, which is for all panelists, which is to think what we can do collectively and or individually. And obviously we'll start with the individual in this panelist session, but to think collectively about eradicating these biases holding women back. I think we already have some ideas, but I'd like to ask you individually first, what you think is your first step in your own role. So maybe if we go back to Marla.
individually, this is when you're having these conversations, like I think it's Shireen, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, applying for these positions, and then and keep applying. Let them keep seeing your name there. They need to be able to see your name over and over and over again, whether you get it or not. But keep applying collectively. As you have people that support you, that are telling you you need to do that, that's what you want. You want people that are going to be supportive of the fact that women need to be in positions. So therefore, we're stepping up when we're showing out. We're having these conversations. We're going, social media is a big thing. Like when all of these things are coming out, you calling out, I'm big on calling out employers. I will @ someone quickly on Twitter. And sometimes I get blocked, and that's okay, because then I will @ the fact that they blocked me. And other people see it too. And so they begin calling people out. That it's time to call people out for their foolishness, because that's the only way that things happen. We've sat by so often just being quiet and saying, oh, well, I didn't get it, maybe next time. No, this is the time. And so the time is now to call them out. So I think that's what we can do collectively. That's what we can do individually, so that it will make the system know that you can't do this anymore. We won't stand for this.
Yeah, and I love that you're, as an individual, engaging with the collective, because there is power in our individual presence on social media and in linking up with others. So I think you've made some amazing points and given people some inspiration as to what to do next. I'm going to move to Louise and ask you the same question.
Hi, right. Yeah, that's individually, we have to have the conversations, and I've heard it. We need to be the change that we want to see. It's up to us to do it, and no one else is going to do it for us. No one else is going to walk into an interview room and ask them why I didn't get a job. It's only up to me, and I've been put down because I didn't have enough experience after maternity leave. I needed another year to consolidate. I've been told all of the rubbish. I've got stronger words for it, but I'm not sure I can say it. So I've been put down because I haven't been ready because of maternity, and because I'm a woman. I've actually been asked on an interview how my role as a woman has affected my leadership style, and then how my role as a mother has affected my leadership style, which it's absurd, especially when you're asked that by a woman. So we need to do it. This isn't just the white male panel we're talking about here. This is everything. This is everyone, and there's biases in all of us. And I'm not sitting here saying that, I'm absolutely perfect and I have no biases. Of course we do. That's why it's called unconscious bias. We need to know what our unconscious biases are. I need to know from my staff what their unconscious biases are. I need to know what I need to work on. As a leader, we need to provide coaching for our female staff, for all of our staff. But we need to eradicate this imposter syndrome that I had before coming on here today. And then you sort of coach yourself through it and think, you know what? I'm good enough. I'm good enough. And I'm going to make sure you know I'm good enough. And if you're not listening, I'm just going to start shouting even louder, and I'll @ you, and then I'll @ you for blocking me. I totally get it. So you need to do it as an individual, but you need to bring in your warriors with you, and that involves men as well. I'm not just saying, this is all females. This is men. This is our he for she's. There's plenty of them out there, but we need to bring them in together and move forward together.
Yeah, I mean, a great point, and that's why when we'll move to Nunana, because he's been our he for she for support in so many ways, and I can see others in the chat speaking about how they would never have been asked those questions. So what can males do, Nunana, in this role to individually start to eradicate these biases and pass on the word to your colleagues who may not be attending these events?
Sure. When I looked at the question, I was thinking certainly individually. What I always say is it's important to check one's own assumptions constantly. And that's already been kind of shared a little bit already. But, it's just so basic, just ask yourself, why are you behaving this way? Why did you come to this conclusion? Before you externalize it, before you take the action, ask yourself. And then certainly if you see things happening, speak up. And as males being in a position of privilege, we absolutely need to speak up when we see some of these circumstances that we've just talked about, like a bad interview question or rejections for really lame, strange reasons. We've got to speak up and challenge that. So I actually thought of a couple of examples of this from my own working situation. We've had situations where a married female with children, people thought, oh no, this person wouldn't want to travel and represent the organization. They'd rather have a role that's more kind of staying put. And I don't think anybody took the time to ask, well, why not? Have we asked her what she prefers? Why did we just make this assumption? And so, by challenging that, I suddenly realized, oh, actually, they have a far different ambition. And guess what? Giving them the role that was in the office would have limited their leadership potential because they wouldn't have had that exposure to all these different opportunities. So, what can you do to just challenge those types of assumptions? Another example was someone I was mentoring around job applications got a job offer that was way below, market rate for what they should have been getting paid. And they were thinking, I guess I just have to take this. And I said, no, you don't, go back. You've got all this research, all this stuff to back you up. Just say, like, I deserve more than this. And you've got all these factual points. And it took quite a bit of, encouragement to say, no, you should go back and ask for this, what you're due. And inevitably she did, and she got what she wanted. But the response that she got was really scathing. Like it was from a female person who hired her and was like, you should have known that this was the way it was going to be, and so on and so forth. And, a lot of huffing and puffing and basically being, slap on the wrist, this is not what we expect, and so on. And I thought, would you have responded this way if a man had asked for, a fair wage? And so there was definitely a lot of assumptions, a lot of bias there, a lot of thinking, oh, this woman is bossy for just asking. And so I know that there's an unfair burden, of course, on women, when you do have to speak up and when you have to, the toll it can take to kind of put yourself out there. But that's where us male allies, hopefully we can come in and whether it's speak on behalf, whether it's encourage, whatever we can be to be that source of support, I think is important. And certainly not just not just stay in the realm of kind of words and encouragement, but also actions and thinking about how we can actually dismantle structures that perpetuate these systems.
Thank you, Nunana. That's you're firing up the chat here with with your comments, and I think that those are excellent points. The way that you're interrogating what people say, interrupting them to correct any so that people are checking their biases in order to dismantle the common stereotypical perceptions people have, which is just one story and one way of looking at it. And some people think that, okay, maybe that story is true in one perspective, and then they hold that to be true for all women, whereas it isn't. And so and I think that a lot of the chat has also been talking about things like having a mentor, having a coach, having someone who's like your sponsor at work, who's really going to help you and lift you up, rather than putting up barriers in place for you to get there. And it sounds also that what's coming through are things like we need to apply and ask for what we're worth, and to be advocates for not just others, but also for ourselves, in order to think that we are worthy of this, and that, you know, we deserve to be paid what we have, and we deserve a place at the table, and we deserve a place in leadership, and that's also coming through really, really strongly in the chat and with all the responses you've been saying. So thank you so much. But leading then to another question that we have is like, how do we then empower others to be the upstanders to address this systemic bias that has happened? So what are perhaps some strategies or some ways in which you have done this? Marla, would you like to go?
Thank you. So for me, it has been, because we are so much so in a digital age now that, you know, everybody is, I know at least here, we are 100% distance learning. So everything I'm doing is on the computer. So for me, it has been having these panel discussions like we're doing now, making sure that in the trainings that I'm doing, I'm letting them know that this Upstanders, this is what we need. We need other people to stand with us. Making sure that there are several Twitter chats that go on all through all hours of the day, making sure that those conversations are being had so that people can see, showing them the data, because, you know, a lot of times you say it, but people need to see the data. Data is important. So showing them the numbers of what it is so they can see this is not just made up. This is not just my feelings. This is not just how I'm being treated, but these are others who look like me, who are doing things that I'm doing, who other people who are supporting us as well. Those people who are calling for others to say something too. So that's a huge thing. Making sure you're still saying something, making sure we're having these conversations, and making sure that the data is always up to date.
Yeah, you make a great point there, Marla, about the data, and because some people are engaging with that at that level, and that will sometimes be the impulse and the impetus someone needs to think about, oh, we need to change something here, and that can be going from just caring about it into actually being really wanting to do something about narrowing that gap. And it's also, I think, important to be able to measure how we're progressing with this, because if we're unable to then think about, are we narrowing it at all? So it'd be great to see, like, what does it say in then 2021 or 2025, and have we made any progress with our initiatives? So that data piece is really important as well. Yeah, and so Louise, I'd like to hear from you actually about how perhaps you empower others to be upstanders to address systemic bias.
Well, thinking about it, I mean, I've written down as a leader for my staff, but actually something's just occurred to me. It's exactly the same. It's just as you were talking, Marla, about data, and it's not just feelings. So I see it from a safeguarding point of view, and I say a designated safeguarding lead at school, so I get this all the time. And imagine me turning around to a child and saying, oh, your mum hit you? I don't care, I need to see the evidence. And I think we should be treating it the same way with our children, and we need to allow them, we need to empower them to stand up to each other. And that's exactly what we're doing in school. Is we had a racist incident with a 5-year-old child, and we believe that it came to light because we have empowered that other child to say, he was racist towards me, you know, he's saying my skin is like poo. So that's the level of racism that a 5-year-old would, but it's racism. Okay, so we've empowered that child to go, do you know what? Maybe a year ago, someone else has said that to me and I didn't think that was wrong, but actually now I know, because my teachers are empowering me to say, this is wrong. You cannot comment on the color of my skin as a reason for not to like me or a reason not to sit next to me. And so we need to start as teachers, as adults, we kind of feel that we need to keep moving forward, but really get into the youngest of our children and empower them, because they're the next generation that are coming up.
Wow, yeah, what a powerful story. And you're absolutely right. And that's why I want to move on to Ebony's work and your work with her in terms of doing that work within your own system and empowering your students to be able to be more aware. And that obviously has a knock-on effect in the homes that those students go back into as well. So hopefully this video link will work. We have, let me know if you can hear her though. That's the one bit I'm not sure about. Can you hear the video? Give me a thumbs up if you can. No? All right. I'm getting some shaking heads. So let me just change the output a second.
I think I could hear a little bit, maybe if the volume, if you turn it, just need it to be louder. So something was coming through.
Okay. We'll go back. So we'll go full volume.
Unfortunately, that's still not working, Kyra.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna stop and we'll go first to Louise while I work it out, and then we'll hear from Ebony afterwards. If we can do it that way around, that'll help.
Send you a little chat. When you're sharing your screen, there's a tiny little option to say share with computer.
There we go.
Share your screen and then share with computer.
There we go. Yeah. All right. Let's try one more time. If not, we'll go to you. Thanks for that.
So I'm going to talk about some of the few things that we could do, or just some of the things that we could do to tackle systemic biases within as educators. For me, I think that it's really important that we teach the children, we show them, we tackle these things from when they're young, so that they can challenge these ideas as they get older. It's really common, in schools and topics like superheroes. Why is it that we always show them things like Spider-Man, we show them Iron Man, we show them Captain America, but where are the women? Where are the female? Where are the strong women? So I think just unpicking our curriculums and actually having a look at it. We're doing things like firefighters. Why is it that we always represent, we have male representation? I think it's really important to show from a young age actually that women are strong and women are on a level ground with men, but we need to teach that to the children so that they're able to question things as they get older. So for me, I would think it would be an ethos in a school. So it would be, like I said, unpicking the curriculum, having a look at it, having a look at the representation of women within your curriculum, having a look at your books, the books that you have, what we're exposing them to. It can come down to displays, having a look at the imagery in displays, having a look at the role of women in the displays as well, and also just having women, strong women to show and have good examples of women who've made it, women who are doing things, in the world. I think that now is the time with all the things we've got with media that we're able to show just so much more. And I think they learn from example. So if we're able to give them the strong representation, it will only lift them as they grow older to, feel strong about themselves. And also it will, I think, empower them to be able to speak where maybe others that we could have done, but we haven't done previously in the past. So just to wrap it up, like I said, I think the main things is unpicking the curriculum, unpicking the whole environment of a school, sitting down together, brainstorming and really auditing everything, the whole school environment, and from that growth will happen.
So as we move forward, I think let's have a little bit about the process that you went through, and Louise, if you don't mind, because that was a nice introduction from Ebony, just to tell us how you looked at it, how you started the conversation, what happened next within your school.
Yeah, so to begin with, we took I'd mentioned it before, we took a temperature check on the culture of our school, where we were. And then from that, we decided on what we wanted to be. And what we wanted to be was an inclusive school. So at that point, we didn't unpick it far enough. We just knew that we needed to be more inclusive. As a Senko, I immediately thought of disabilities, and that was the main focus that we had, and ensuring that the children with their special education needs were catered for. And then again, it's our own thoughts and biases on what diversity is, and then moving forward, and actually, it's intersectional. So we pulled it apart, and a working party was formed, and it was formed with people in the school that wanted to drive it. So I put it out there, and I said, we really need to drive this forward. Who's up for it? And hands were going up left, right, and centre. But the people that chose if they're going for race and ethnicity, or if they're choosing disability, so they've got their areas that they focus on, and they meet weekly. And what they're ensuring is that, as exactly as Ebony said, our environment is completely diverse. So we have Lauren, who takes over the diversity part for disabilities, and what her job in the school is to make sure she's walking around the school. She's looking for Makaton being used daily. She's looking for our Makaton signs visual in our school, our pictures that we're using on our slides, in our emotion cards, that they are fully representative of all disabled children, and they are not the 1% that are in a wheelchair. So 1% of disabilities are in a wheelchair. So we're not looking for that. We're looking for limb different children. We're looking for visual impaired children. We're looking for neurodivergent children. We're looking to represent them. So that's her job. I won't go into all the other bits as well, but that gives you an idea of what the working party does, and they drive it forward. They have the difficult questions with staff. They provoke, they provoke the questions, and they're putting on the training. So we've had our disability awareness training by Liz Wright. We've had race awareness training, gender bias training, and I think that's it for now. So our next step is LGBTQIA+, and that's our next main training that the staff will go on, and then we move it forward from that. But I do firmly believe that we have to be trained in it, that we have to know the language surrounding diversity and equity, and we have to know what that means, because if we don't, we can't drive it forward. We're kind of like feeling our way in the dark. We need to be confident to say, this is what we need to do, but this is how we do it. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a great overview, and I'm sure there'll be more questions for you that come in on your Twitter. We can also see examples of some resources being shared in the chat as well. So a Padlet from Pauline O'Brien on anti-racist curriculum resources, and of course ECIS have just mentioned their relationship with Lantana Publishing. So having access to more resources, a breadth of voices is obviously the first step. And I'd like to thank you, Louise, for sharing your story with us there. We're getting close to the end of our session, and I know that a couple of people have had to duck out because of time. So I'd like to just open up the floor to those of you who are in the chat still with us, to pose your questions directly to the panelists. So feel free to share your questions. And while you're all typing or thinking of your questions, I have one that I wanted to go back to right from early on. It was about raising the point about having more teaching assistants in secondary than in primary, thereby affecting progression for primary school female teachers. Anyone have thoughts on that question that they'd like to share? I'll find the comments if I can read it exactly. I'll hand that over to any panelists who'd like to take it. Maybe Louise.
I mean, teaching assistants is my favourite topic, because it's always there's always a part of education that has more or less, and as a leader you're trying to pull in from one and don't take that assistant away. But I think I remember the comment, and I think they're absolutely right. It's needed more than ever in secondary, to keep that momentum going, and you're not on your own as a teacher with, possibly, major incidents that could happen, that racist incidents, whatever it may be. But I think it should be across. And I think, Nana, you'll be able to say more from a higher up on how important assistants are at your level.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nina. I'm just waiting to see. I'm
Sure.
trying to find the original comments.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, just the only thing that I was going to say, maybe it's just a spin on the same concept of teaching assistants. It's also, I'm curious, like this moment of COVID-19 has forced a lot of institutions to go into distance learning kind of modes. And I'm curious about how this might help us to re-envision what schooling is in a way that supports people with families, whether that's male or female, and what that might do potentially as well in terms of providing additional support, for teachers to manage classrooms and all the rest. So also curious about that aspect. And I think that's potentially something we shouldn't just completely throw out, but also use this as an opportunity to think what we could do differently. And I think higher ed might be more suited to that, but it doesn't mean that schools, the school side shouldn't be looking at that as well.
Yeah, she's clarified. It was Gretchen. She said she meant more assistant principals in secondary than in primary. So for primary teachers who want to make the jump to leadership, there are fewer positions that they feel they are qualified for. So yeah, got the wrong assistant there when I was asking the question, but I think we understand how to address that.
And it's reminding me too about how we view leadership. So there is a feeling that there's a scarcity of positions of leadership, but I think that there are also lots of ways in which we influence and are leaders at every level, whether you are a teaching assistant or a teacher or an assistant principal, and also even if you may not be having a certain position that has a title in your school, there are opportunities like joining Women Ed or being part of a SIG group or with ECIS and developing your leadership skills in those ways as well, that also that help you to hone your capabilities and capacities and for you to network, and we know how important the mentorship part is as well, and so for you to be able to meet others and to get ideas and so on, and I think that that's also something that is what the conversation is reminding me of as well, that sometimes we also need to find things that we're going to be paid for and so that's as well, which is why we feel that there's a scarcity of that. But I would love to see a transformation of schools so that there is more shared leadership, that it's less hierarchical, and that maybe we in the future we can have one that is going to be more have more distributive leadership as well, so that there isn't the feeling of scarcity.
Yes, and so some comments coming in that we can help to address the resources issue. I think it would be helpful if we, after this webinar, create a resource that we can share via ECIS, because there is definitely a need to share resources and to share best practice. And I'm sure that Marla will be borrowing heavily from your suggestions there to reach out to your networks and to utilize the social media connections that we all have, or that we may not realize that we have, because there are many voices out there to consult with who are doing this and have been working on this for years. So thank you for your attendance. I think we're just closing with a little bit of information that maybe you want to sum up with, Angeline, your quote there that you chose.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I found this quote and I thought it was really impactful, that social systems are tools designed by humanity, and these systems reflect the biases and the values of the designers. And so those that task the designers with requirements and expectations. And so for us, I think we're all in the field of education here, and we're all designing what that looks like. And so I think the way in which we put in those designs that are going to impact the children and our colleagues and in the future that is now as well. And so addressing the systemic biases around us through a lot of what we've discussed today, I think is going to be really important. And so I hope that you're able to walk away from this heart-to-heart conversation today and thinking about perhaps some of these takeaway questions. You know, are your actions promoting equity, or are they perhaps perpetuating inequity on an unconscious level, perhaps? Or am I a part of upholding a biased cultural norm, or am I part of eradicating systemic bias? And hopefully it's inspired you to think, what will you do tomorrow, or at a medium term, or as a strategic plan in your institution as well.
Thank you very much. And if you'd like to connect with any of the panelists here today, you have their Twitter handles once again. This will go on YouTube, so if you had a colleague who couldn't come and missed the live episode, then you can stay connected on the ECIS and Women Ed YouTube channels as well. And we'd like to thank you. We know we've gone over a little bit on time, so thank you for sticking with us and for your participation and being part of the first in this exciting new series.
Just 5 minutes, not too bad. So thank you, Nunana, Marla, and Louise for joining us, and do stay in tune for more ECIS, Women Ed, heart-to-heart conversations coming your way.
I just want to say a quick thank you from ECIS. It has been an absolute honour to have all of you with us today. I really hope that, and I know that this partnership will continue, and we'll continue to offer amazing webinars moving forward. I also do just want to point out our leadership conference that we have coming up in April. The theme this year is diversity and belonging, the power of commonality and inclusion. And we do have a track for women who lead. Our call for proposals are still open, and I would love for some of the attendees today to submit proposals for that conference. So I will make sure that I send that round to you all. And then just one other quick thing from us. In January, we have a new mentoring programme coming out. So Women Supporting Women mentoring programme coming in January 2021. So we will ensure that you all get that information as well. But thank you all so much once again, and thank you for all attending.
Thank you.
Thank you all.